Okay, so welcome everybody. Project Advisory Committee meeting number 2 for a housing capacity analysis. Andrew, I'll just let you run with it here.
All right, sounds good. Nice to see you all. Um, I think I've got an agenda here that was sent out ahead of this call, but I'm going to start with just some quick introductions. We've got a bit of an update on the overall project, including some revised numbers for the buildable lands inventory, um, and some updates to the housing needs allocation, and we'll talk about what those are if you weren't in the last meeting, some of the takeaways from those documents, and the next steps that we'll be up to in the coming months. But let's go ahead and start with just a brief round of introductions. Again, my name's Andrew Parrish with MIG. We are helping the city with this project. And I will hand it over to some other MIG colleagues here, Matt and then Katie.
Hey, Matt Hasty. I'm a senior project manager at MIT, and I'm supporting Andrew on this project and all of you. Thanks.
And hi, I'm Katie Wall. I'm a project associate, also supporting this project. Today I'll be taking notes, and then I'll kick it back to the city.
I'll just pass it over to Brendan. We might as well we'll make our way through the consultant team.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Brendan Buckley with Johnson Economics. We're part of the consulting team working on the housing forecast.
Okay, well, let's start with Dan and then we'll move to Travis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Del Toso, resident of Boardman and a member of the committee.
And I'm Travis Hyder. I'm also a longtime Boardman resident with Mr. Del Toso there and part of the committee as well.
Okay, and here in the room we have Ragna.
Ragna Tenak. I am here from the Planning Commission.
And then city staff. There's 3 city staff that are here today. Myself, planning official for about 7 more days. Just entering the room is
Stephanie Case, planning official after those 7 days.
And then Aurelie joined, I think, from her office. Aurelie, you want to introduce yourself really quick?
My cover's a little high, but hi everyone. I'm Aurelie, planner here at the City of Boardman.
All right. I think we've captured everybody. Thank you.
All right, thanks, folks. I think most, if not all of you, were here for the meeting number 1, where we went over some introductory materials, but maybe as a refresher, or if you weren't at that meeting, the purpose of this project is to do a full assessment of the capacity for future housing development in the urban growth boundary of the city of Boardman. And so it's everything within city limits and also within the urban growth boundary, which is shown on this map here. So the dotted lines are lands that are not currently within city limits, but are still in our study area. The state of Oregon considers that part of the area you need to look at for a housing capacity analysis. So our work is focused on residential land. It's really focused on making sure that the city has enough land available and zoned for residential uses to meet future housing needs. And so as part of our process, we look at all of the land within the study area and exclude land that's just for industrial uses or just for commercial uses, and really focus on the stuff that's zoned for residential land. So some of that has city zoning today because it's inside the city limits, and some of it has county zoning because it's in the urban growth boundary area that the SR zones in yellow here have county designations, but they're still included in our study. And so we basically use zoning designations to identify what's residential land and what is employment land. So this is really focused on the yellow land on this map. And there are a couple of properties that are currently commercially zoned, but they have, I believe, approval or are currently kind of underway in residential developments. So we've included those as well as part of the city's future capacity. We look at constraints to buildable land to figure out how much development capacity is actually available. So for the city of Boardman, we have wetland inventory that's from the county and from the National Wetland Inventory. There's some land impacted by the FEMA 100-year floodplain. Steep slopes, there's a couple of spots that are ever so slightly slopey. And then the BPA, Bonneville Power Administration right-of-way is a significant constraint that kind of runs right through town and affects some residentially zoned properties. So those are all accounted for, and anything that is under one or more of these constraints is basically excluded from the capacity. So the state has a number of rules about how you designate land as either vacant or developed or partially vacant, which is kind of an in-between category. So the yellow parcels on this map and in your materials are considered partially vacant. So they're typically a larger parcel that has room for one or more additional structures, and those are typically kind of a rural lot with that might be a couple acres large, but it's got one house on it. And so the state says that you need to consider some additional infill on those lands. And there's also some committed properties that are part of a subdivision within the city limits today, but they've been deeded over to the city for a future park as that area develops out. And that's along Paul Smith Road, kind of in the western part of the city here. There's also a few properties that are essentially platted, but they're vacant. And so rather than use kind of general assumptions, we've just assumed that one unit per each of those lots is going to be developed in the future. And you'll see on this map those the constraints I was talking about in kind of this red hatched area. So we are accounting for those when we're talking about how much land there is available.
Before you go on, Andrew, go back to the map. 2 comments. We need to refine your committed map. Those parcels along the northern tier, that's only the 3 on the western side. The rest of those are not. And on this scale, I'm not sure I'm seeing that really well. And then I have a question about the partially vacant, because not completely, but almost exclusively, those partially vacant, no, maybe they are. Well, most of them are in the urban growth boundary.
That's right.
So as you guys looked at those, is that analysis of partially vacant based on the county's lot size, or is it partially vacant because if annexed, it could build at a higher density?
It is not explicitly looking at the county's kind of zoning requirements. And so the safe harbor that the state has is if there's a lot on the site, you assume about a 1/4 acre is available for that current home, and then the remaining acreage becomes developable. And we did have an assumption for should that become annexed, it will likely be one of the city's residential zones. And I'll look up exactly how many units per acre we were assuming for that land. But it is, when we're talking about the number of units that are available in the urban growth boundary, we are assuming that annexation occurs and some city zoning gets applied there.
Okay. That's helpful. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
And to your first point, it just doesn't show very well at this scale, but yeah, we do have the 3 lots on the western portion here beneath the BPA easement as being committed, and the remaining being, I think there might be room for 1 unit kind of on the southern end of each of those properties.
Yep. I'm guessing it looks more red than it should because of the hatchie for the BPA easement. So that could
Right.
be.
Yeah, that's the case.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, to your question about the so this table kind of runs through all of the math for how many lots are we looking at, what's the gross acreage for those lots, and we do some adjustments for the constraints that are on the site and also for assumptions for new rights of way and new infrastructure. So we usually take about 25% of a given lot and say this is going to be new roads, things like that. And so we're left with net developable acres by zone. And so for the SR here is, I believe that stands for suburban residential. This is a county designation. So there's a lot of acreage in that category, and we've assumed about 6 units per acre once that becomes actually urbanized within the city of Boardman. So that's where these numbers are coming from. So we've got, if you combine those partially vacant sites and vacant sites, and then the platted lots that I was talking about, we're at about 4,150 units kind of plausibly available for the urban growth boundary of Boardman. So just to kind of spell that out in a couple of different ways. So that accounts for about 700 acres of residential land between the city limits and in the urban growth boundary area. Most of the capacity is in that, or I guess the plurality of that capacity is in that suburban residential county designation. And a fair amount is in the city's residential future urban and residential multifamily zones. And if you break that down into how much is in the UGB area versus how much is in city limits today, about 2,600 units are available in the city today. And you'll see that's largely because of these pretty large vacant parcels that are within the city limits today, kind of north and south of Coonsey Lane there. And one of the refinements that we've been discussing with the city is in coordination with the kind of infrastructure planning that the city's doing right now. There are plans for some wastewater treatment facilities kind of in the area shown in the dashed red here. The sizing of those is not yet known. I understand it depends on how much kind of rural or non-city land that those are planned to serve, but that's one factor that'll kind of reduce the vacant acreage out there, but that still will leave a pretty significant amount of developable residentially zoned land in the city today. So we are making a couple of refinements to this in the next step, but I'll just pause here and see if there are any further questions or comments from you all. Does this make sense? Does this track your understanding of kind of what's available in the city today?
It does for me. Andrew, you're asking your own question. You got your hand up.
I think it did that when he raised his hand. I think it was like.
I think the computer knew.
Oh, did I raise my hand just and it saw me?
Yeah.
That happens. Now I don't see where to take it to. Anything else from folks on the call here, or put this back up now that I can see that. And I guess the reason why cities do this exercise, or part of the reason, is maybe one of the big questions that cities try to answer is there enough room in the urban growth boundary? And if there's not, then cities say, okay, well, then we need to change the urban growth boundary by expanding it or swapping some land out, or strategies along those lines. But as we'll get to in a later kind of section, the 20-year projected growth for the city of Boardman is less than 2,600 new units and less than 4,000 units.
However, that state projection, it's 728. We've built that many in probably the last 5 years. So I don't put a lot of stock in the state's projection. But we'll cover that when we get to that topic.
Yeah, and maybe related to that or as kind of a bridge. So there is a new type of analysis that we're in the middle of currently called a development ready lands inventory, a DRLI. And what we're looking at here is basically access to infrastructure that infrastructure and kind of other metrics that will give us a better sense of how much of that land, how much of that acreage, how many of those 4,000 units are like realistically developable in the near term. So we're really just focusing on land that's inside the city limits today because you would need to go through annexation to unlock something so that it's available. So that's so that would put those lands off the table. And then we're looking at proximity to existing infrastructure. So we've got some data for the existing and planned water system improvements. So what you're seeing on the map here are lines for the existing kind of water mains in blue. And there's a purple dotted line for planned system improvements based on the work that the city's been doing. And then we have some buffers from those. So there's a dark blue 100-foot buffer and a light blue 500-foot buffer. Basically trying to identify the lots that are, adjacent to or stubbed to water infrastructure, and then lots that are nearby but would probably still need some significant investment to bring the water lines to the property to develop it. So that's for kind of the existing facilities, and then the planned facilities, that's kind of another step down the road. Those facilities need to get built and then extended to reach certain properties. So there does seem to be pretty good, water coverage near residential areas. We're kind of in the middle of this analysis now, so we'll have some more information in the near future about what portion of properties this affects. But if you recall, there's these large undeveloped sites kind of in the central part of town here. Those large parcels, the ones in the north along Main Street, they've got water lines kind of around the perimeter of the property, and the southern ones, they have they don't have much water access currently, but there are planned facilities to go along the roads in that area. So not a lot of immediate capacity for water infrastructure today, but there are planned improvements in the future. And we're taking a similar look at transportation facilities, which, since water lines usually go in the roads, it's a pretty similar map here. And we do expect to get wastewater line work and kind of some more information in a few weeks here, I believe, from the city's infrastructure consultants. So that'll be another layer that we put on. And the results of this analysis are going to say, what portion of those sites within the city limits today that are residentially zoned, do they have good infrastructure access right now, or is that another barrier that the city would need to address, or that would be kind of the fodder for future strategies for the city to look at for when thinking about future housing. So that's something that's underway right now. Any thoughts or questions about these infrastructure maps so far for the development ready lands inventory, or any other kind of barriers or characteristics of certain sites that we should be thinking about when we're looking at what the near term, like maybe 5-year growth of residential land is in the city.
I really want to hear from Dan and Travis and Ragnar, but one thing I will share is that when you look at the large parcels that we still have available, they're all owned by Dan McCarty. And so it's the large 160 acre piece, and then the 80 acres that is the two smaller 40 acre circles. The large piece is in the city, the smaller piece is in the urban growth boundaries. In talking with Dan McCarty,
You're talking about these along,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. In talking with Dan McCarty, he would rather give up the farming, and he's willing, he understands he's the barrier to our next large lot, single family development. And he understands that, and he's willing. I'm sure the price will have to be right from whoever the developer is, but he would rather see the two smaller circles be developed before the large parcel. So that doesn't really fit the scheme where we've got lands. So the lands he's looking at saying, I'd rather have those go first, are lands in the urban growth boundary. But they are also lands that are probably more closely connected to water and transportation. So I don't know how that affects, Andrew, the analysis that you and Brendan and Matt will be doing. But just kind of from the perspective of looking at dominoes and which one will fall first, I suspect it would be the two small 40 acre circles that are there that are in the urban growth boundary that we'll see convert to large lot, or not large lot, but single family development prior to seeing the larger circle. So, but I think the facilities that are adjacent kind of support that as being the place that goes next.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And they are in the city's urban growth boundary currently, so they would just need to be annexed. They don't require a UGB amendment or anything from the city to make that happen. So if that will depend on the city's annexation process and how you handle that typically, but that's certainly possible. And yeah, we can flag those as having good infrastructure access, but not within the city today, but the property owner has indicated willingness there. So I think those are all good factors to talk about.
Yep. Travis, Dan, Ragnar, any thoughts seeing all of this?
Nothing specific for me. I'm just, looking at it's ironic you talked to Dan, because I talked to him the other day as well. And he said the same thing to me. But yeah, anytime you're looking at the infrastructure, if it's, monetary wise, it'd be way easier to get it to that area. But it still seems like we have, some internal to the city limits that we have an opportunity with for sure.
Yeah, the Chaparral subdivision, we have, trying to remember if I've signed that plat or not. I've signed a couple lately. I think I've signed the Chaparral plat, but the Chaparral lots, the next 65 for development should be moving towards houses being built over the summer. So those 65 lots will be moving into our active inventory. But we've also been building single family homes at about a rate of 40 plus a year. So that's going to happen pretty quickly. We'll see. And then River Ridge still has 2 or 3 phases left. We're not sure quite what's going to happen with River Ridge, but I know the current developer is looking at getting out of Boardman and has been shopping that property. So hopefully we see that transfer to somebody and those lots continue. And there's probably another 80 left with River Ridge. So we're moving quickly to having, again, at about 40 houses a year has been on the low side of our average. 3 years, and we can very easily have consumed most, if not all, 4 years for certain, we'll have consumed everything that's somewhere in the current pipeline.
Great insight. Thank you.
I have no comments.
Thanks, Dan.
This is very informative.
Brenda, you have anything you would add? Nope. Okay.
All right. Well, I think that is helpful to hear about the development pipeline, and I think for our purposes for this development ready lands inventory, we will treat being within city limits as kind of one of many factors and not a make or break kind of item, just because we know there are some sites that might have reasons why they might go before lands that are already in the city limits.
Perfect.
Okay, well, I will pass it over to Brendan Buckley to talk about some updates to the housing allocation and what that means for the city here.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I'm just going to give a quick update. This was information that we had the preliminary forecast in the in our first PAC meeting, and I just want to talk about some updates we did. I'm going to switch off my video because I've gotten feedback that my feed can get inconsistent. So hopefully you all can hear me okay. So again, this is stuff we covered. So just real quickly, I want to talk to you about how we updated it based on some of the things we talked about last time. This process now uses the state forecasts that you see here. They do this for every city in the state. They do a 20-year and a 1-year forecast, and they're planning to update them each year. So this is the one that we're dealing with, and their 20-year forecast for Boardman is 728 units, and then they break it down by their estimates of income levels, income segments, where those housing units are needed. There's a component in here both of new housing from growth, and then they are also have a methodology to try to figure out if there's any sort of overhang of needed housing from the past, from underbuilding. So any demand that's kind of built up over time. And so these are the numbers that we're dealing with, and this hasn't changed since the last draft. Next slide.
So Brendan, I'll just share briefly that last Thursday we approved a 240 unit multifamily development that will probably be it's in 2 phases, but they anticipate phase 2 will follow rather quickly after phase 1, probably be occupiable within a year or a year and a half at the outside. So we've met, it looks like we've met a third of that already.
And I think they indicated that they're looking at it being a market rate.
Yeah. So that clearly would take that, you know, whether you look at it, the 81 to 120 or the over 120, it would be that, it probably be those 2 categories. So anyway, just sharing.
No, yeah, that's excellent to know. And Boardman's one of those communities that's been growing very quickly. That's not the case across the whole state, but there are certain regions, and certainly Boardman is one of those cities. So that's an interesting part about this new system, is getting these forecasts from the state that we need to use. And it's probable that some of these forecasts are undershooting or off by quite a bit. And it's kind of something we have to roll with. What it really means is for the fastest growing communities is that you're probably going to have to do this kind of study a little more frequently. There's you know, to keep up, and if these numbers start to fall behind, then the statewide forecast should, you know, because they're doing this every year, hopefully that will sort of keep up. But you know, you'll have to do this study again probably before you'd really like to, but just to you know, because your growth might be overshooting these numbers.
Yep, absolutely.
Next slide. Thanks. So this is the same look here, breakdown by income segment. Kind of a complicated table, but this just sort of shows what those what those income segments look like. But then on the right side, there's a summary of what that, what types of housing that might really be talking about. So these are tables pulled out of the draft report that I think we're sent around before this meeting. So um, all this is information you can see in there. But really, what this is getting at is, not just a need for housing units, or sort of generic housing units, but really getting into what different types of housing units are appropriate to meet these needs. And then at the lowest end of the income segment, really talking about housing that needs some kind of subsidy or needs to be part of a state or federal program, really to even be able to hit those really low income levels. If you get up a little higher, then you have market rate apartments and things like that, manufactured homes, some things that might be affordable in the middle. And then finally at the upper end, you have single family homes, different types that are affordable to those of middle or upper income. Next slide. So really the final kind of table in the draft report is this breakdown of different housing categories, different types of housing that this new state system for this study requires that we look at some of these different types of needs. So there's estimates in here of the different things, different types of housing that might fall under that 728 units. The things that have changed since last time is under the category A there in the first draft, we used what's called a safe harbor, or just sort of a rule the state provides to come up with an estimate of the different types of housing under these broad categories. And as we talked last time, we saw that sort of rote approach from the state is not giving the detail that's needed, and also the numbers weren't very realistic. We redid that here to what I think maybe more sort of realistic numbers for Boardman coming up there. So 60% of needed housing still remains detached single family housing. And then you get into more of the middle housing, which is now allowed. That's things like duplex through a fourplex, also cottage cluster housing, some of these newer types that are being talked about across the state. And then finally, continuing need for multifamily housing in the community. And then under that, you just see these different categories. So we continue to look at the need for the government assisted affordable housing I just mentioned. Also, Boardman does have a significant share of manufactured homes, either in mobile home parks or on single family lots. And so we continue to factor that in as a need going forward. And that's the type of housing that really meets an important part of the affordability ladder, because it's not subsidized, but still a little more affordable than a new single family house. Agricultural worker housing, we've assumed that it's sort of remains the current share as you find in your current inventory. Next slide. And these remain the same. There's estimates of housing for older folks and for people with disabilities, and those are based on your current share of those types of households in your current population. But one change we did make was for single room occupancies. That's category I here. And we added an assumption that that Boardman could support some of those. Unfortunately, there wasn't a good way to come up with an assumption, frankly, based on current inventory or anything like that, because you don't have any of this particular type of housing right now. But it is very good for the types of construction crews that you have in the area. It can be good for agricultural workers. So we added an assumption that some of the new housing that might be something that you're looking for is single room occupancy. For those of you who don't know, what that means is it's almost more of a dorm style living with very small individual units, but often with a shared common space and a shared kitchen, maybe shared bathrooms. So it's a way for a really affordable type of unit, and also can be for temporary people or more transient workers. Those are the changes that we made to kind of reflect things that we talked about last time. Most of everything else is the same, but I'm happy to answer any questions and refresh any discussion on what these different categories mean.
I've got a question, Brendan, just about J there. Is there a definition for large housing units, like number of bedrooms? And is that is that current kind of amount? Does that make sense given the other kinds of things we've been talking about?
Yeah, so that's kind of a sticking point, is the comparison of large housing units to that sort of first breakdown under category A, and how well are those really going to match up. The I haven't read the actual definition of large housing units in a while, but it's not well defined. It's not a specific bedroom number or anything like that. So um, it's just more of this estimate again is based on the percentage of households in the city that are family households. And so it's advisory, I guess, is how I would put it.
Yeah. Maybe that, I mean, that sounds like something that would be helpful to get folks on the call's input about, the state wants some number for large housing units. I think to address kind of the needs for families, you in a lot of communities you see where there's a lot of multifamily housing. It's studio, 1 bedroom, maybe there's a couple of 2 bedrooms, but the state wants to make sure that folks consider some amount of larger households as well, and maybe trying to allocate those across different housing types and different kind of income levels. Like, can you get larger multifamily structure, larger, greater numbers of bedrooms, even in a multifamily product, that kind of thing. And I think the city of Boardman has, a high number of family households as defined by the census, but also pretty significant housing needs for people, who might be more transient or might be working in construction or, looking ahead. Maybe the city has some other goals to think about in terms of how many, larger units versus smaller units you're looking for. And I guess I'll just say overall, the state does give cities lots of deference in how they want to think about these housing types and where you want to, state city policy and going forward. What does the city really need to provide or at least allow going forward? So a lot of information from us, but any thoughts on these categories here on the in the needed housing types?
I would kind of be curious what our committee members are aware of, just being in the community around a couple of these categories. In particular, agricultural worker housing. I think the 15 that are captured there tend to be probably the units at the old MJ Hotel, although I'm not sure where those are captured from. And then given the again, kind of our worker population, the next slide, it's the single room occupancy one. What do you know that's out there? What's your sense of a need for that kind of occupancy opportunity? And are you aware of it happening in the community? I'd just be curious, like, what our committee members might know.
I mean, for me, obviously, being with Lamb Weston, most of my employees are either, I mean, I would say 80% probably are homeowners. And so I don't have a lot of, now my Patterson facility is opposite. There, I have a lot of seasonal workers that will come up here for just the summers, work harvest, and then go back to Mexico or wherever they want to go. But I don't see that a lot in Boardman like I used to when I was younger. But I think it's more on-site residents now. Might be a couple families sometimes in those residencies, but that's kind of what I see now. I'm not seeing as much of the farm labor, at least in my industry.
Okay. I guess I would reply to that a little bit, Travis. That's great to hear. I know I worked for the county for a long time, and there were a couple of homes in Oregon that we knew had a couple people that lived in them through the winter, and then summer came, spring, summer, and fall, and it felt like there were three families, three large families living in a 2 or 3 bedroom home. So I often heard that comment about a couple of homes in Oregon. I never really heard that about homes in Boardman.
There's a few. I know of a couple above me there that there's a couple families living in.
Right.
I don't think it's as prevalent, at least in the major housing. I don't know about like the trailer parks. Those may have that. I can't speak to that.
Yeah. Okay.
I would know, in the trailer parks, several, people will have a
Right.
room,
And in Maple,
4 or 5 people in there, and then they each
Perfect.
have a room. And in some single family dwellings, there are some during the summer that they have 4 or 5 families in there, because the cars come and go and are there all the, so I only know of 2 of those where there's probably more than the occupancy is probably more than they're supposed to be.
Okay.
But
Dan, any thoughts from your perspective?
I'm just thinking down between where Travis and I live, Maple Crest has there seem to be a lot of families in that area. The one thing I noticed is it's nothing like Hermiston. Hermiston will rent out hotels um, uh, at here and where I'm at today, and even apartment complexes. You notice that they change over that. The interesting thing, I am the single room occupancy. We don't have any of those currently, do we?
Well, that's just it. We don't know of any. My guess is there's some of it. I mean, think of it. Single room occupancies used to be really common related to school districts. Often school districts would reach out and say, hey, we have a new teacher coming to town. Does anybody have home where they can live for a while until they get established? I don't know that that's the case anymore. So historically, I think that was one kind of industry where you would see that happen. We don't know if it's happening. That's kind of, I think the reason for my question is.
and I see advertisements for it on Facebook Marketplace, but I don't know where those places are.
Right.
They'll say Boardman, but that could mean the unincorporated area.
Well, and then there was a woman who had a home outside of town here for a long time.
She still does, but it's outside of town.
Right, it's outside of town. But she regularly rented a single room, or she had a couple of rooms that it was part of the house, but they had a separate entrance from outside.
Boston's,
Or maybe the
that's
only
who that
entrance
is.
from outside. But again, more in the county, not in the city. So yeah.
Right.
And that's a kind of I don't know, a dedicated or specific form of housing. It's not something that's really recognized explicitly, like in the city's zoning ordinance or code is a thing you can do, but that doesn't mean people don't rent out rooms in their house and effectively have that kind of housing available to people. But it's not something you would sort of come across in any kind of data that we'd look at and say, oh, yes, this is that thing. I think part of the question is, does the city, is there a need for that type of housing? And if there's a need for that type of housing, how can the city allow more easily allow that kind of housing to be developed in the future. It's a thing that the state of Oregon has said cities need to allow that if they're over a certain, actually, I think it's maybe all cities or at least over 2,500 in population need to allow it. So that's sort of the question. Like, do you all see the need for that type of housing in Boardman? And then if so, that's sort of a potential strategy or policy that comes out of this process is for the city to, allow for it and have some standards for it and stuff like that. So I think that's the question for y'all is, what do you think? Is there a need for this?
The hotel rooms are certainly full. I do know that, or have been during the weekdays. So,
Well, and I think to that end, they're constructing a hotel that are all suites with kitchenettes. I think probably because of that sort of need. I just don't know how to put a number on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just it. We know that our hotels are, our hotel utilization in Boardman is just opposite of what the industry standard is. Our hotels are full Monday through Thursday or Sunday through Thursday. And they tend to be more empty on the weekends. And that's contrary to every hotel. And that's why a lot of the folks in the hotel industry are hesitant to expand in Boardman because they see the opportunity now. But I think they're concerned about what happens when this thing, and I put that in air quotes, when this thing ends, what happens to their hotel capacity? So, and most communities do not look favorable on hotels in commercial districts converting to apartments. So, not to mention there's all kinds of building code issues with that to some degree as well. So, yeah, I think there's a need for single room occupancies. I think it is probably happening. It's kind of like Stephanie said, it's out there, but it's kind of flying under any kind of radar screen. So we don't know where those numbers are. Yeah. Andrew, get control of the conversation.
Roger that. Well, I think that covers everything that we wanted to bring up today. The next steps for us are finishing up this development ready land inventory and doing the kind of formal comparison of land need and supply, which is going to find that there is sufficient supply of land. That's not really the constraint for the city at the moment. And then we'll be moving into what's called kind of the measures to accommodate needed housing, which is more of like the full document that says, here's the types of housing you need, here's the land availability you have, and here are some strategies that the city can take to make sure that those levels of housing are at least allowed for. So having the right zoning designations in the right locations, having the right policies in the comprehensive plan, and allowing the right types of uses in your residential designations. That'll be kind of a next step here, and we're hoping to wrap up the HCA in 2026. And I don't know if you want to say anything about kind of the coordination of this project with other comprehensive plan updates and things that the city has going on, but this is just one piece of long range planning that the city is undertaking overall that will hopefully all work well together.
Yeah, I'll just share that on that long range planning front. We've also kicked off and had our first PAC meeting, PAC and TAC meeting for our Main Street Interchange Area Management Plan update. That is also slated to wrap up by the end of this calendar year or early into 2027. All of these projects are feeding our biggest project, which is an update to our comprehensive plan and our development code. We're 5 PAC meetings into, I think, that process, soon to have PAC meeting 6 the end of July. So we've got a lot of information from our TSP update, from our EOA. Information will be coming from this project, the HCA, and then our Parks Master Plan, that'll all be feeding into the update to the comp plan. So we should see the draft comp plan policies. Actually, they're in my inbox. I'll be reviewing them. We should see those go in front of the PAC and probably the Planning Commission in late July. So, and the Development Code, we're beginning to have real earnest discussions about it at the same time. So these are good discussions in these other groups to forward to our there's too many consultant teams. Let's see, that's Cascadia that's doing the Development Code and the comp plan. So these conversations kind of funnel to them to help them understand kind of where the thoughts are overall. So lots of work happening. You can track it all on the city's website.
And maybe to that point, if you would like us to take a look at proposed comprehensive plan policy language, if that's already kind of in the works related to housing and kind of in the context of everything that we're doing here currently, that could be helpful, and it'll inform our measures to accommodate needed housing kind of piece, because we want to make sure that from the state's perspective, it looks like the city's getting credit for all the things that it's doing to advance housing as part of kind of this process, and making sure that the comp plan updates are incorporated and addressed in the right way.
Sure. What I might do, Andrew, is connect you and Matt with Anais and I think Jamin. Jamin's working more on the Development Code. Anais is more on the comp plan. So I'll try to connect you guys and figure out who's doing what. So, yep.
That sounds great. Okay. Just try to make this stuff do double duty where it can, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's all that we really wanted to cover today. So I know I slotted more than just an hour up for this meeting, but we got through it pretty quick. Is there anything else for the good of the order that folks on the call want to make sure that we're aware of?
Yeah. So Travis, Dan, Ragna, as committee members, any items for the good of the order? Final questions?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Well, y'all get a half hour back, 35 minutes. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the input that we've gotten very much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Bye.
That was fast.